Where do you come? Oh, we actually have these here. Yeah, it must have been the poker night.
Somebody
left you part of the Blackwater, Danny.
So if we get those white tables and leave them in the hallway over there, we can set them up next week. Yeah, Willie said to leave them in the hallway. Yeah, I know. He was here before. He dropped me off the hot spot.
This thing is putting his right arm. I said, "Wasn't it nice of me to do?" You don't know who it was. I love you, your mother.
Okay, so where's nobody's here yet in the room?
I can't believe that. Oh, one. Are you the one?
Huh?
Are you the one participant?
Yeah.
Are you the one?
Yeah.
I don't know how that works. But I want to learn, so I've got to learn.
Okay, they're out of there if we want to grab some white tables.
What up? People going to meetings?
No, they're leaving they had the 5:30 meeting in there.
I'm the best.
Hey, Sheriff, what's up?
Yeah.
So I want to see my friend.
Oh, I see. Somebody's here. Greg. Hey, Greg. Oh, let me see something.
So what time? Oh, it's 15 minutes.
Oh, they must put me on the TV. Greg, can you hear? Can you hear me? Coming in, come in, come in, come in. Greg, can you hear? Greg.
Appreciation whatsoever.
Danny, it's Greg.
How you doing, buddy? Can you hear?
I can hear fine.
All right. How you doing, man?
Pretty good. Getting bored here.
It's
Need a
nice to see you
vacation.
guys every week.
You have snow there?
Nah, it's 75 degrees.
Oh,
We had snow last week or the week before, actually.
my relatives are up in New England. They get snow.
You know what they say here in Oklahoma? If you don't like the weather, hang around 5 minutes, it'll change.
Yep.
We had -8 degrees and 8 inches of snow. And 3 days later, it's 70 degrees.
That's crazy.
I know. We got a shitload of people here. We got like 70 people here. Let's see.
In the meeting where you are?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Hey,
that's
how you
good.
doing?
I'm good.
All right.
How are you?
Good. Nice to see you. Okay, Dan Cutter, Leesburg, Virginia. 2 people entered the waiting room. View. Admit. Admit. Hello.
How are you?
Oh, I'm gonna use that. Hey, Deb.
Hello.
What's up, guys? Let me see. I just admit this last one. All right. It's all yours. Oh, more people coming in. How do I get these people in here? Participants. Okay.
I'm good.
Hi, Charlotte. You in, Charlotte? Are you in? What's happening?
Hey, Danny.
Hey, honey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right.
You look great. I love the shirt.
Oh, thank you. It's like 20 years old.
I love it.
Are you still doing the, what were you doing? The adjusting thing? The adjuster?
Yes. Uh-huh.
How's that going?
Well, because of COVID, they took us out of the field. So,
Oh. Because over here, we've got them from all over the country from the damage we had.
yeah, look, that if I was an independent adjuster, that's where I would be. But I work for a big company
Oh,
and they
okay.
have their own adjusters in Tampa, or in Texas, Oklahoma,
All right.
and all.
Well, it's good to
But
see you there.
I work from home.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, and I get overtime. I'm making twice the money I was making before.
Do you see that?
Hey,
Can
What
you
do you
guys read the
mean?
board?
No, talking to them.
I know. I don't know. I went to eat sushi with a girlfriend last night. I just didn't feel like going to the meeting. How was it?
Hey, can you guys read the board here behind me?
No.
Yes, I can see it.
What's your
Okay.
deal? What's going on?
They can't see the board because of the shirt.
Everybody should have worn that sunglasses.
Go fuck off.
Hi, honey, how are you?
Oh, God.
Hey, there.
I told her she's off to a good start. We're 35 years, but I need to get to quick study. Okay, I got to see. Is my friend Nan in there yet?
Hey, Dana.
How do you get this one on full screen?
Oh,
Didn't we do that already?
Yeah.
View, go to view here.
I do that from my,
Speaker view.
but that always happens when they
Here,
come
let
in.
Dorothy in.
Actually,
I don't know, I do that one. too.
Gallery view is gonna bring that up.
It's not this hard though. Usually it's just a little. I do it sometimes.
Teresa.
3 years later, I'm back.
Did it by accident?
Hi, Teresa.
Oh,
Guys,
Teresa,
Shannon, you're there in person? How many people are there? 500?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Last week there was a lot.
Yeah, there's a
Danny,
lot.
big crowd. I would love to be there to see you in person.
You could be.
What'd she say this here?
She said, I'd love to be there in person. And I was gonna shit on her, but I decided not to.
Well, you're welcome to. We got some seats for you.
Well,
Shannon, I
So-
would
My
talk to
friend
you.
Nan likes that.
Who knows how to do this Zoom thing? Anybody?
Scotty, come here.
What do you
Oh, he
need,
broke it
Danny?
last time.
What's
trying to
going
get
on,
the
Danny?
view
I
on.
might be able to help.
That box
How
there.
do you get this?
You
See,
double
that's
click
what
that
happened
box.
the other day. It's
Double click that box, see what happens.
the touch screen.
That's what happens when you
Yeah,
double
let
click
them
it.
in. Come up to view again. It's gotta be a speaker view.
Okay, so how do you change?
You
That
know
the
what,
single
Danny?
view right
On-
there. Or,
The-
see, if everybody would turn off the mics.
For me, the view is up on the right-hand corner, and it's like a menu bar.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at here.
Okay. I'll be quiet. Bye.
What's your name? What's Jerry's wife's name? Jerry Jones.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't.
How'd you
You
do
got it.
last time?
You got it.
Now, all right, wait. Who do you see on the screen?
You,
Just me? You see
Yep.
everybody else?
just a little bar, just the
Oh, okay,
Hollywood
great.
Squares.
All right, you did it.
Well, no.
No,
I mean,
it's gonna record on yours.
I'm gonna record exactly the way it looks. There we go.
There you go. That's it, Scott. You got it.
How did
Leave it
you
like
get this
that.
to come up?
All right.
Floyd got his mic.
Can you get the people up on the side?
Somebody called. We don't want to, do we? Or do you?
Yeah, leave it like that.
Hey, DNAB, DNAB, mute your phone?
Hey, can all you got? Yeah. You muted everybody?
Yeah, they're all muted.
Okay.
We're good now, Danny.
Okay.
Except for that guy.
Thank you. What's up, Lynn?
What's up, Danny?
Not charged? I like the shirt. That is, man, reminds me of my LSD day. Hey, Deb.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing all right.
Hell yeah.
I can't tell who's on there, but I'll have to see it later. Oops, somebody's trying to get in. Where is that to click them in?
I just did.
Oh, you did?
That sound you heard was them coming in. Yeah, there's two sounds.
Okay.
There's a sound when they want in, and there's a sound when they're
Okay,
in.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. See?
All right, we got a minute left, guys. Grab a seat and
Blast off.
I was letting them in.
Yeah, it's like, doo-doo.
Yeah.
So when I went in, yeah, sounds like a doorbell when they made it in.
And somebody told me that there's like.
Oh, you wanna move this? All right, guys. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay. A little house cleaning again. So it looks like we're back to the 15 minutes recording, opening the room up. So if you're watching the recording, you got 15 minutes of nothing yet until the class starts. Couple of things I want to just ask you guys. Somebody told me that they were announcing this in some of the meetings, and you shouldn't do that. Okay, this is the reason you shouldn't do that is this is not an AA meeting. This is not any 12-step meeting. It's a private study, and we don't follow the traditions. So therefore, you shouldn't announce it in a meeting. And besides that, we don't want people coming in after this point anyway. It's this is week 5. So if somebody wants to join us now, they need to go online to YouTube and Danny Falcone 2021. When they get to YouTube, if you type that in, you'll pull up the first 4 weeks, and then they can catch up. But this is not one of these things like, what do you want to do tonight? Oh, let's go to the meeting that they're having at the May Club. So this is not about that. So this is a commitment that you make. If you can't be here, you could watch it online, on Zoom live, or you can watch it on YouTube recorded. But besides that, let's not ask other people to come in. They could come in next year when we start over again, or they can watch online. This is something for those of you that are new to this, something we've been doing every year for the last 27 years, 28 years. So every week we've been doing this. So it's nothing new. It may be new to you guys. It's new now to the internet world, but all right, come on in, guys. All right, so we're gonna pick up this week on we're on page 17. There is a solution. Now, somebody, I think in week 1 or week 2, I don't remember who it was, asked about what a real alcoholic is, and I said, we're gonna get to that soon. So I don't remember who that was, but whoever it was, we should get to that tonight. Okay, page 17. There is a solution. And again, when I ask you guys questions, if you've been through this and you know this, don't shout out the answer. You don't need to tell everybody what you know. It's more beneficial for people that don't know to ask the question about it. So the title of this chapter, There is a Solution. There's a message there. What might that message be? There is a solution? Hope? Okay. Huh? Spiritual wellness.
You don't have to die drunk.
They're gonna make some suggestions.
Okay. Spiritual wellness is kind of a, that's kind of reaching for the title. Not that that's not in there, but for the title, we're talking about the title of the chapter. There is a solution. The word however you want to say it, implies singular. Okay. There is a solution. So as far as Alcoholics Anonymous is concerned, and though this is not an AA meeting, we are studying the big book and we are talking about Alcoholics Anonymous. As far as AA is concerned, there is one solution. Now, the book admits that there's other ways to get sober. My brother just died last year. He was over 40 years sober, never went to a meeting in his life. But he was a born-again Christian. He found God and he got sober, and he stayed sober all these years. So I know for sure that some people go to church and they get sober. Some people go see a psychiatrist and get sober. There's other ways to get sober. We admit that in our literature. But that's got nothing to do with us. As far as we're concerned in AA, there's one way to get sober. Yes,
Spiritual experience.
to have a spiritual experience is the spiritual awakening is
Awakening. Yeah,
what we're looking for, yes.
that's, okay,
But the way to get sober, we're gonna go over that now.
okay.
So the title of the chapter, There is a Solution, is insinuating that there's one singular, one way to get sober, as far as AA is concerned. Okay? What I want to say to you that there are two powers. There are two powers and one solution. Two powers, one solution. Not in any specific order, but one power might be the power of the fellowship. And that is a power, no doubt. The other power is the power of God. And no doubt that is a power. So some people come into recovery after 20 and 30 and 40 years of drinking and drugging, and they come in to the rooms and they tap in to the power of the fellowship. And these people can stay sober for weeks, months, and years. The other type of person is the person that after 20, 30, 40 years of drinking and using comes into the rooms and they tap in to the power of God. And these people can stay sober for weeks, months, or years. That is a fact. That both of those class of people I just mentioned can get sober and stay sober for extended periods of time. The thing that those two people have in common is they've never taken the solution. They've just tapped into a power. And it's important to understand this because there's so many people in the rooms that just tap into the power of the fellowship. So some people come into the rooms and they tap into the power of the fellowship and the power of God, and they're on fire. And they could stay sober for weeks, months, and years. But those people also have never taken the solution. They've just tapped into the power. It's kind of like if you go online, you can buy yourself a ministry license. Did you know that? You can become a minister like that. You can have all the qualifications, the certificate, and everything, and technically and legally speaking, you are a minister. You don't know shit about that stuff, but you have. So what you've done is you've tapped into that certificate. You've tapped into that power, okay? But you haven't done the work. So those three types of people that we talked about, the people that tap into the power of the fellowship, the people that tap into the power of God, the people that tap into the power of the fellowship and God, these people can stay sober for weeks, months, and years, but none of them have taken the solution. And it's important to understand that. So it's kind of like, you know, surrounding yourself with dwarfs doesn't make you a giant, right? And tapping into the power of what we just talked about doesn't constitute you changing who you are. Eventually, that's why you see it all the time. You hear it all the time. Guys got 20 years, guys got 15 years, 12 years, went back out, right? You see it all the time. Eventually, and who knows how long that might be, but eventually you're going to be stuck in a position where that power that you've tapped into is not with you right then and there. You're going to be in the wrong place, the wrong time, and your head's going to be in the wrong state of mind, and you'll drink or you'll use. Because you've never taken the solution. The solution is what changes who you are. So when I got here, I was an alcoholic who drank naturally, normally, and instinctively. It didn't require a thought process. That's just what I did. And staying in the rooms for years doesn't mean anything if you don't change who you are through the solution that we have. The solution changes us. We're going to go through this book. We're going to come to parts that are actually characteristic changes of your very nature, of who you really are. We'll get to that. But at this point, I want you to understand the difference between the powers and the solution. Okay, so back to there is a solution. If you shoot over to page, my book's falling apart here. Page 25. And the first paragraph there says, there is a solution, right? And what it's going to do here in this paragraph, it's going to go over the first 7 steps. So there is a solution. Almost none of us like the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, step 4. The confession, step 5. Of shortcomings, 6 and 7, which the process requires for a successful consummation. But we saw that it really worked in others, step 2. And we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it, step 1. The rest of the paragraph is basically step 3. So this paragraph that tells us that there is a solution in italic covers the first 7 steps. So the first 7 steps, I think you heard me say it in here already. The first 7 steps is the process of recovery. Whatever you're working the steps on, after you've completed the first 7 steps, you should have recovered from that seemingly hopeless condition. Okay? After the first 7 steps. And again, yes, there's 5 more steps. But 8 and 9 is to start going outside of yourself and fixing the wreckage, right? 10 is to do this stuff on a regular basis. 11 is to improve your relationship with God. And 12 is to carry this message and to practice these principles in all our affairs, right? So the process of recovery is the first 7 steps, as it's outlined here, and there is a solution. Now, you can't just do the 7 steps and quit, because there's those other 5 steps that we need to do, and we need to keep doing all of these steps. But the process of recovery is the first 7 steps. There is a solution, tells us that these first 7 steps is the solution. So if you tap into the power of the fellowship, or the power of God, or the power of the fellowship and God, and never take the solution, you're probably going to get loaded again. When? Who knows? Again, it's weeks, months, or years it could be. Okay. Anybody got any questions on that?
Will you repeat the
Okay.
The what?
I don't know, it's just funny when he does it.
He should be back.
Hey, you guys mute yourself, please. So on page 25, almost none of us like the self-searching, the leveling of our pride. That's 4. The confession is 5. Is that it?
6 and 7 with the shortcomings,
Right.
Yes,
and then step 1 or 2 and then 1.
yes, 2 and then 1 and then 3. So all 12 steps are required on a regular basis. This is not a one-step program. I hear people all the time in meetings talk about, oh, you gotta work step 3 on that. You gotta work step 7 on that. It's a 12-step program. None of this was ever set up to take a step and working on something. It may help, but you're never gonna go through the solution by just throwing 1 step at it. Okay. Whatever the situation is, it's 12 steps. Now, we talked about this already. Those of you that have been sober for a long time should have something that they're working the steps on. Okay? There's no need to work the steps on alcohol and drugs if you're sober 10 years. I mean, that doesn't make sense. Right? So the 12th step tells us that we practice these principles in all our affairs. And last week or the week before, we read what the principles are. They're the steps. We read that in our literature, right? So to practice these principles in all our affairs, that means we just keep working the steps on something. But here's the way that goes. Let's say you're working the steps on shopping. I don't know why that came to mind. I was looking at Shannon, that's why. So if you're working the steps on shopping or any other topic that you choose to work the steps on, it's only step 1 that addresses the problem, just like alcohol in the big book. Okay, so we admitted we were powerless over shopping, that our lives have become unmanageable. That's the only step. When you get to the 4th step, you're not doing the 4th step on shopping. You're not doing any other step on shopping. You're doing step 1 on shopping, like we're doing step 1 on here for alcohol and drugs. And then the rest of the 11 steps are all just the way they are for any step, for any topic. They don't change. Okay, does that make sense?
No,
Okay.
I
What?
mean,
So, okay, there's 12 steps.
right,
One of them address the problem.
right,
That's step 1.
right.
The other 11 steps address the solution and the program of action.
I'm with you now.
Okay,
Yeah,
so whatever you're working the steps on only requires you to work step 1 on that. The other 11 are the same. Where you're at in your life at that moment is going to be different than where you were when you worked it last time. So the steps may seem a little different to you, but it's the same process.
got it.
Steps 2 to 12 is the same process, no matter what you're working the steps on. Though it may seem different to you because you're in a different frame of mind, a different spiritual plateau, whatever. Grown up a little bit.
A little bit.
A little bit. We don't want to grow up too much, too fast. Yeah. Okay, hold on, huh?
Okay, so you're working the steps on something different each time.
Yes.
You get to like the steps 4, 5, 8, and 9. Now, are you coming up with whole new sets of resentments and things that you need to inventory on everything? Or is, some of that gonna be a lot of the same stuff that you don't really need to hash over every time?
So I'm gonna repeat that so they hear it here. He asked if we're working the steps on something different, do we go over the same things in 4 and 5 and 8 and 9? And when you go through the steps the first time, whatever you did in 4 and 5 and 8 and 9, if you finish that, you're done with that. So let's say this year, so every year I go through the steps here doing this with you guys. And whatever I didn't put closure on last time, I'll bring it this time.
So this basically, if you more revealed to you, you put that on the
Yeah.
inventory. Deal with it.
Yeah, but you don't have to wait to go through the steps with more is revealed. You may, you may have something come up that you can pick it up in your 10th step. But this is a full process of taking a situation and applying the 12 steps to it. You had your hand up?
I may be misunderstanding. So just for clarity, I haven't worked through all my 12 steps, even the first time. So I'm in.
So you need to focus on alcohol and drugs 100%.
So my question, just for clarity, is I'm sure it'll get better once I get to the steps. Is I always thought 4, 5, 8, 9, that those things that we listed were in direct relation to the thing that we're working the steps through. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense, but it's not correct.
I didn't realize.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Did everybody hear what she said? Huh?
No.
Yeah. So what I meant was, so as I'm making a searching for moral inventory, I always thought that moral
Yeah.
inventory was gonna have direct relation to
To-
my drug use.
Yeah, to alcohol and drugs.
I never
No.
knew that. And that's
No, and step 4, we follow the directions in the book. The directions are real clear. It tells us to write 4 things down. It tells us to look at resentments, fears, sexual conduct, and harms to others. And it specifically says to write those things down. Okay, nothing else. What we do in step 1 should address a lot of the stuff that you're talking about. Because, and we've talked about this earlier on, step one in our literature, it tells us that the only step we have to do 100% is the first step, right? So when somebody comes into the rooms and they ask somebody to sponsor them and the sponsor says, yeah, are you powerless over alcohol? And they go, yeah. Okay, is your life unmanageable? Yeah, my life's unmanageable. Okay, do you believe in God? I don't know. Are you willing to believe in God? I guess so. All right. You ready to make a decision, turn your willing life over? I don't know. You're willing to make that? Okay. All right, let's write a fourth step. That happens a lot in the rooms. And they've taken somebody, and if you remember in the first week one, we broke down how the program is broken down. The program is broken down in 3 parts. Remember that? What is the problem? What is the solution? What is the program of action? That's how the program was developed, and that's how the big book is also written. What is the problem? What is the solution? What is the program of action? So if you take somebody that's new and ask them those questions, you admit you're powerless over alcohol, they say, yeah, okay, you've done your first step. No, you haven't. And you bypassed the first 2 parts of the 3 parts of the recovery program. You've bypassed what is the problem, what is the solution. You've gone right into the program of action, and the person's going to be lost, or they're never going to stay sober. So what we need to do is we need to we're on week 5, and we're just now starting on there as a solution. So there's a lot of work to do on step 1. And we try to teach it with alcohol and drugs, but the same principle applies. The only thing that may not apply and is the doctor's opinion. If you're working steps on shopping, right? May not apply. There's a big echo coming out of that. Somebody has their mic on there. Somebody mute yourselves there, please. Good. I don't hear myself no more. So does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay. And Scott, did we answer your question?
Yeah.
Who
So, I
else?
mean,
Go ahead.
you shouldn't have to go through and even on the character defects also, you shouldn't have come up with a whole new list of those either.
Well, the character defects, see, as we go along, right, hopefully, we're not going to be adding to our 8 step, or minimal, and the 4th step really should be just what you didn't get last time, right? And then 6 and 7 is stuff that may take a long time for you to work through. So if you haven't, defects of character is a lot of work. We'll get to that though when we get to that point. But right now, the focus is about step 1, okay? And the powerlessness and the unmanageability that we deal with, regardless of what the topic is: alcohol, drugs, shopping, sex, relationships, gambling. There's probably 300 and something 12-step programs out there, and that's fine. And people, Overeaters Anonymous, there's all kinds of, that's fine. The people that go there, they're getting help. That's great. Me personally, I can take the big book and I can work through any topic because that's what the steps tell
I
me.
think that's kind of been my thing is, so I get through the drugs and alcohol, and I go and do the weight thing, and I've got a whole new sponsor, new program, we're doing the whole thing over again. And then this time I'm wanting to do cigarettes. And I'm like, I don't want to do another 12-step program because I feel like I'm becoming a 12-step program.
You might need a 12-step program for your 12-step programs.
That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah.
Do I have to do all this stuff
No.
over again? And I'm,
No.
thank God.
No, we cover everything in here. We cover everything in Alcoholics Anonymous. Not drinking and not using is the very tip of sobriety. It's the lowest form of sobriety. Not drinking and not using is the lowest form of sobriety. There's a whole lot wrong with us. Bill Wilson said there's a lot wrong with us, of which a lot has to be done. And that's why in the 12th step he put, practice these principles in all our affairs. So we would address all of these issues as we go along, as we stay sober, and as we grow spiritually. So one thing at a time. I've worked the steps on something and I didn't recover from it. So I the answer is, I guess I wasn't honest with myself. So I did it again. I got a little better, but I didn't recover from it. And
That's how I went in.
well, so what? Then you just go back at it again. The promise in the 12th step is that we'll have an awakening, right? That we'll be able to do, be, and act like we've never been able to do, be, and act before. And if you get to the 12th step and all the results along the way, if you're not feeling them, then go back and do the work again, because you've missed something. You know, we don't have to get this by next Tuesday and graduate. Yes.
You have a question. I'm sorry, keep trying to get your attention.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. I know we're touching base on like the first step and what we can work it on, including the rest of the steps. But you had mentioned earlier 4 things in step 4, and I got resentment, fear, sexual conduct, and what was the last?
Harms to others.
Harm to others?
Yeah.
Okay,
At the end of step 4, it tells us we list the people we have harmed.
okay. Thank you.
Mhm. We'll cover that deeply when we get to step 4. Okay. All right, so back to page 17 then. There is a solution. So did that make sense to you with the 2 powers and the 1 solution?
Yep.
All right, good. So down on the, towards the last couple of sentences in the second paragraph, it says the feeling of having shared in a common peril is one element in the powerful cement which binds us. So what he's saying here is that the fellowship is just part of this, okay? But that in itself would never have held us together as we are now joined. So the fellowship alone won't do it. That's what he's saying. The fellowship is just a part of what we do. It's got to be really careful to not mistake the fellowship for the steps. And the last thing on here, the last sentence says, this is the great news this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism. This book, not the fellowship. This book. This is the great news that this book carries, not that the fellowship carries. The fellowship is good and it has its place and it's needed, and you need to go to meetings, you need to get a fellowship around you, and that's all great stuff. But don't mistake that for doing the steps. You have to apply the 12 steps in your life to whatever you're working the steps on. Otherwise, you've just tapped into a power and you haven't taken a solution. Okay, page 18. And just at the top of the page, it again confirms this is an illness, right? An illness of this sort, and we've come to believe in an illness. But go down to the 4th paragraph. 4th paragraph says, and it's all in italic, but the ex-problem drinker who has found this solution, who is properly armed with facts about himself, and of course, if you have found this solution, you will be properly armed about the facts about yourself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. So what he's saying here is, until you can relate, that's why we keep coming back to meetings and we keep going to speaker meetings and we keep listening to people sharing meetings, and eventually somebody's going to be telling your story. And one of these days in a meeting, you're going to go, oh, I can relate to that. I did that. That's just like I was, you see? And until somebody can relate, they really can't begin to recover. Because people like us, we need to have, the book calls it a message of depth and weight.
That's it.
Yeah, we need to have that, because people like us, we're too quick to write shit off. It ain't for me, ain't gonna work for me, may work for them, but it ain't for me. They don't know me. They ain't like I was. They ain't as bad as I was. We're a bunch of unique people, aren't we? Yeah.
Very special.
Permanently.
You know how you catch a unique rabbit? Unique up on them, yeah. You know how you catch a tame rabbit? Same way, yeah. All right. So, so you need to be able to relate to somebody. Once you start to relate to somebody, they got your attention. And once you got somebody's attention, that person can begin to recover. Until then, they're writing all kinds of stuff off in their head. You're talking to them and they're nodding their head and they're smiling and they ain't listening to a friggin' word you're saying. Because that's how we are. You go, yeah, yeah. And I'm thinking about that girl that I met last week down there, or what I'm missing over there, and I'm not hearing a damn thing you're saying. But I'm smiling and nodding because everybody's smiling and nodding. I know how to do that stuff. Right? But once you say something that hits home, now you have my attention. When you have my attention, I can begin to recover. Very important. That's what he says here, the next sentence. That the man who is making the approach has had the same difficulty. That he obviously knows what he's talking about. And his whole department shouts at the new prospect that he is a man with a real answer. That's just what we just discussed, right? He is a man with a real answer. Why? Because he's talking about stuff that you've been living. Okay, go to page 19. The first paragraph says, none of us makes a sole vocation of this work, nor do we think its effectiveness will be increased if we did. We feel that elimination of our drinking is but a beginning. So that's what we were just talking about. The elimination of our drinking is but a beginning. The book comes along and tells us that we have solved the drink problem. Outright says that. And in the 10-step promises, it tells us what kind of a miracle we are. We think we talked about that a little bit, right? That we've overcome all this stuff. So if that's the truth, then there's a whole lot wrong with me besides alcohol and drugs. And it would be silly of me to, I've had guys that come up to me with 10, 12 years, 15 years sober and ask me to sponsor them. And I always say, well, I told you about the guy in Florida that had 45 years sober at the time when he asked me to sponsor him. And I said, why do you want me to sponsor you? And he says, because I've never worked the steps out of the book. 45 years sober. Now, the man didn't have a problem with alcohol and drugs. He's been sober 45 years, been a member of the fellowship, goes to meetings, all that stuff. Hasn't had a drink in all those years. You can't convince me that he's got a problem with alcohol. But man, his life was a mess. His home life was a mess. His work life was a mess. His family life was a mess. His life was just a mess. And that's what we call stark raving sober.
Yeah.
It's ugly. It's ugly, man. It's really ugly. So we feel elimination of our drinking is but the beginning. It's just the beginning. We have to address that first, though. We have to address the alcohol and the drugs first. We have to overcome that first. When we do, then we just get right back into it and pick the next thing on our list. And if you're honest with yourself and you're armed with the facts about yourself, you got a list. I've been sober a long time and I still got a freaking list. And I know everybody know in AA has got a damn list. So you just, yes.
So the facts about ourselves, is that just our alcohol problem or the unmanageability that we see now?
Well, the facts about ourselves is everything, Mitch. It's all of that. It's all of that. It's, of course, first and foremost, it's about the alcohol and the drug. Why do I drink when I swear I ain't going to do it no more? When I come home after 2 days and I look in the mirror and I go, what's the matter with you? You're weak. Why can't you stop this? And then you go, I swear to God, I'm never going to do this again. And mean it with every fiber of your being. And then you are the next day doing it all over again. What is that?
Insane.
That's powerless.
Yeah.
When you do what you don't want to do, when you do what you've already sworn you're never going to do again, and you keep doing it, that is powerless. That's powerless at its finest. I said to you last week, we've been practicing the first step for 20 years before we got to AA. Haven't we? Over and over and over again.
Yeah.
We just keep practicing that. And whatever you're going to work the steps on, probably the same thing, right? There's people been sober a long time and they're working steps on something finally. And whatever they're working the steps on, holy shit, they've been doing that for a long time. And it's negative stuff, you know, but they've been doing that for a long time, over and over again. Still buying the same lies they bought with alcohol. This time it'll be different. That's the biggest lie of all. The biggest lie is always this time it'll be different. There's a lot of closer ones to it, but that's the biggest lie. This time's going to be different. I don't know how many times we buy that lie, right? So we're gonna learn to practice these 12 steps in all our affairs, in every issue that we got. Okay, go over to page 20. And it's just talking about people that don't understand us. And of course, we went to page 20 before. One of the three things going to answer such questions specifically, right? We already did that. But down at the bottom of the page, and who was that asked about the real alcoholic? There was a lady. Is she here tonight? No. Well, I hope you're watching or you're watching the recording because.
I'm watching.
Oh, good. Thank you. What's your name? What's your name?
Reagan.
Oh, hi, Reagan. Well, here, we're going to answer your question that I said we're going to answer.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. So, the bottom of the page, they're going to give us three types of drinkers. Three types of drinkers. The first one is the moderate drinkers. And moderate drinkers have little trouble in giving up liquor entirely if they have good reason for it. They can take it or leave it alone. The second type of drinker is then we have a certain type of hard drinker. He may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair him physically and mentally. It may cause him to die a few years before his time. If a sufficiently strong reason, ill health, falling in love, change of environment, or the warning of a doctor becomes operative, this man can also stop or moderate, although he may find it difficult and troublesome and may even need medical attention. Now, I want to tell you that the majority of the people that come into AA today, in this day and age, fall into that category, the hard drinker. There are some that come into AA that are moderate drinkers. And there's a few that come into AA. That's the third type of drinker that we're going to talk about here now. Originally, when they wrote the book, almost everybody was in this third category, a real alcoholic, and already experiencing DTs or signs of that. Okay. But don't forget, I keep telling you this over and over again. I keep telling you for the same reason. I want you to really understand this. The reason they wrote this book was to pass the message out and to raise the bottom up so people like us didn't have to suffer the way they suffer. That's the purpose of writing this book. Okay. So the third type of drinker is, but what about the real alcoholic? He may start off as a moderate drinker. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker. But at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. Now, a lot of people in the hard drinking category may identify with that you lose control of how much you drink, but that doesn't make you a real alcoholic yet, okay? Here is the fellow who has been puzzling you, especially in his lack of control. He does absurd, incredibly tragic things while drinking. He is a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He is seldom mildly intoxicated. He's always more or less insanely drunk. His disposition while drinking resembles his normal nature, but little. He may be one of the finest fellows in the world, yet let him drink for a day and he frequently becomes disgustingly and even dangerously antisocial. He has a positive genius for getting tight at exactly the wrong moment, particularly when some important decision must be made or engagement kept. He is often perfectly sensible and well-balanced concerning everything except liquor, but in that respect, he is incredibly dishonest and selfish. He often possesses special abilities, skills, and aptitudes, and has a promising career ahead of him. He uses his gifts to build up a bright outlook for his family and himself, and then pulls the structure down on his head by a senseless series of sprees. He's the fellow goes to bed so intoxicated he ought to sleep the clock around, yet early next morning he's searching madly for a bottle he misplaced the night before. If he can afford it, he may have liquor concealed all over his house to be certain no one gets his entire supply away from him to throw down the waste bin. As matters grow worse, he begins to use a combination of high-powered sedative and liquor to quiet his nerves so he can go to work. Then comes the day when he simply cannot make it and gets drunk all over again. Perhaps he goes to a doctor who gives him morphine or some sedative with which to taper off. Then he begins to appear at hospitals and sanitariums. Okay. So last week we talked about being able, the week before we talked about being able to read something in here as you're studying the book and relate to your own personal life, right? So you got to find your resemblances of this third type of drinker, how it fits your life, what in your life, was happening that makes you understand this, right? So that's the real alcoholic. Again, most people that come into AA are not real alcoholics. They haven't reached that. They're potential alcoholics. And they may be hard drinkers that have maybe impaired their physical health and maybe took a few years off their lifespan, right? But they're not a real alcoholic yet. They haven't begun to have that. I'm not going to tell you that now. We'll get into that. We'll get into that a little bit later, some other time. But there's some things that also prove a real alcoholic. So Megan, we'll get into more, will be revealed. But that's what the book talks about at this point for the real alcoholic. Anybody have any questions about that?
Yeah, is a real alcoholic the same thing as hopeless variety? Like Silkworth talks about in the doctor's opinion, the hopeless variety. They just did not even see him, but they didn't know what to do.
Well, but when Silkworth talked about that was before they started to recover. Really, once he saw the miracle happening, then he changed his tune about that.
Okay.
But
so it's not really the same.
No, it probably that's what he was talking about. But we label this to be the real alcoholic. Okay, and the real alcoholic, there's physical conditions that, in a nutshell, alcohol doesn't disperse through your system like it used to do.
Right.
Instead, it creates a synthetic morphine in your body, and that's why you become actually addictive to it. That's what happens. But I told you one of the first week or two that this book has stamped their approval in their writing on something in 1936, 37 when they were writing this book, and it was medically proven in 1976. Remember I told you that?
Yeah.
So when we get to that point, I'm going to show you, but that's kind of what we're talking about. Okay. Yes.
I always heard that all my life that natives are so susceptible to alcohol, and that every one of us are. I've seen like in my family, my grandparents, they didn't drink. It's like I said after the court thing changed, and then my mother and aunts who grew up in that way all married alcoholics. They all their husbands they didn't drink. And then I was hearing this the other day in a meeting, and I thought, I know a lot of people that are consumed by it the way I was, and then I see a lot of people that weren't in our race, That was labor.
Yeah.
It bothered me all my life, and I saw that a lot of us, there's some that, my mother, saw her drink one time. I was a kid, and it always bothered.
Yeah, I don't know the medical answer to that. I know the AA answer to that. It doesn't matter. Doesn't make a difference. You're it if you say you're it, and if you say you're it, just get to work and things will change for you. So, you could be, is the native race more susceptible to they can't alcohol affects them different? I don't know. But if you have a problem with alcohol, you're in the right place. That's all that matters.
I see hope today now that people that still got sober in them, and it's kind of starting.
I know a lot of natives that are sober. I know a lot of natives that are sober. Not just here in Oklahoma, actually, believe it or not, in New York too. A lot of Native Americans in New York, upstate. All
I
right.
have a question.
Yes.
Is this why the third tradition doesn't say you have to be an alcoholic to join? It just says you have to have a desire to stop drinking.
So what? I'm not sure what your question is. What's your question?
It's just, I'm wondering about the third tradition. Is this why they said, they didn't say you have to be an alcoholic to join AA? It just says you have to have a desire to stop drinking.
Well,
Because some people probably aren't.
Well, they wanted to be all inclusive, and when they looked at the traditions, again, the traditions are, are all God based, and they're all the traditions are all about what we don't do, right? So to be inclusive, they say all you need is the desire. Now they also knew that if you just took any regular alcoholic, it would be a lot easier for him to say I have a desire not to drink than it is for him to say I'm alcoholic.
Okay.
Actually, nobody's an alcoholic until they come to AA. It's an amazing thing that happens, really. You could go to any bar you want, and go in there and say, who's an alcoholic? Then nobody's going to raise their hand. Right? But walk into an AA means who's an alcoholic? Everybody raise their hand. I didn't become alcoholic till I got sober. No, I don't know how that happens, but that's what happens. So, but it's easier for people to say, you could be the worst kind of drunk that there is, and it's much easier for somebody to say, I have a desire not to drink, to feel, to be part of, rather than to say I'm alcoholic, because, it's very difficult for us to admit we're alcoholic until we get here, So when we get here, it becomes easy to say that. All right. So let's go over to page 22. We're on page 22. Now he says here, the next sentence he says, this is by no means a comprehensive picture of the true alcoholic, as our behavior patterns vary. But this description should identify him roughly. So again, this is not, if that doesn't fit you, it doesn't mean you're not alcoholic. But this is a good kind of definition. Then he says, why does he behave like this? If hundreds of experiences have shown him that one drink means another debacle with all intended suffering and humiliation, why is it he takes that one drink? Why can't he stay on the water wagon? What has become of the common sense and willpower that he has sometimes displays with respect to other matters? Last week, we did a little experiment where we took Scott's head off and put it on a normal person, remember? And took the normal person's head and put it on Scott's body, right? And of course, not literally, but and what we talked about was that the normal person on his head on Scott's body usually goes to a party and has a drink or two, and he's fine. And he goes to a drink now, and it's his head, but it's Scott's body. He takes a drink, and that body wants more. The allergy is ignited, right? And then in Scott's head, Scott's thinking, I got a clean body. This body's good. And I don't know how long it'll be before Scott ruins that body, but with that head, he's going to ruin that body. All right. And so that's what we're talking about here. Why does he take a drink? Why? Because he's alcoholic. We have a twofold disease. We have a disease of mind and body, mental and physical. Alcohol screws my body, alcoholism screws my mind. Remember that. Can't drink because of my body, can't stay sober because of my mind. Let's go down to the bottom of page 22. We know that while the alcoholic keeps away from drink, as he may do for months or years, he reacts much like other men. We are equally positive that once he takes any alcohol, whatever, into his system, something happens, both in the bodily and mental sense, which makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. Again, they're talking body and mind, mental and physical, right? This experience, the experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this. So I think we've already talked about this, but I'm gonna ask you again, okay? I'm gonna ask somebody specific. What was your name, honey? Yeah, Susie? Susie, we have a twofold disease, mind and body. Which one can we do something about?
Body,
Okay, why is that?
because I feel I came to that because you can always take the alcohol part away and the physical effects that it would have actually putting it in.
Okay, how many people agree with Susie? Raise your hand. So how many people think it's the mind? Raise your hand. Okay, the rest of you taking the fifth on this one, huh?
Yeah, but
You're absolutely right, Susan. You have a twofold disease and you can do something about the physical. You cannot put it in your system. You have that power. It may be very difficult. It may be almost impossible, but you have the power to not physically put that in your body. But you do not have the power to not think.
damn it.
It is impossible. We think, well, even when we're sleeping, we think it's called dreaming. In fact, if you try to not think about something, you're going to think about it more. Right? Whether it's alcohol or anything else. That 7-layer chocolate cake. I ain't going to eat that. I ain't going to eat that. I ain't going to eat that. I don't want that cake. I don't want that cake. Just give me one piece. So it is impossible to not think. Now, that's Danny saying that. Now the big book is going to back that up. Page 23. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem of Susie centers in her mind rather than her body. The main problem centers in the mind rather than the body. Regardless of how difficult it may seem or feel or appear, you do have the power to not put it in your system. Thereby, you have the power to control the physical. You do not have the power to control the mental because you cannot not think. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body. Good answer, Susie.
Good job.
Good job. Okay. If you ask him why he started on the last bender, the chances are he will offer you any one of 100 alibis. Sometimes these excuses have a certain plausibility, but none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic's drinking bout creates. They sound like the philosophy of a man who, having a headache, beats himself on the head with the hammer so he can't feel the ache. Then look at the next paragraph. Once in a while, he may tell the truth.
What page are you on?
23.
Okay, I am just so, okay, I'm just so lost.
Did I say 22?
No, he said 23.
Why? I did say we picked up on 22, but then I said now on 23.
I didn't hear.
Or the next page I said, okay.
I didn't.
I'm sorry. Well, 23 says these observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. So what he's saying really is, if you use modern terminology for this, right, these observations will be academic and pointless. Our friend never took if you didn't take that first drink, it wouldn't mean shit. You wouldn't have no problem. You wouldn't set the damn allergy off. And the phenomenon of craving wouldn't develop. Jeff, you got a question?
No, that's good.
Oh, okay. All right. So therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body. All right. Bottom of the page, 23. It says, The tragic truth is that if the man be a real alcoholic, the happy day may not arrive. He has lost control. At a certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, he passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. This tragic situation has already arrived in practically every case long before it's suspected. So what he's saying to me here is that I can't use my mind to overcome this.
Did Bill write this, Danny?
Yes. Um, so the desire to not drink is not going to work. Okay. And that's probably happened to everybody that's just coming in the rooms. You've already passed the point. Yes.
Well, I think that is a good point because I think like my husband, who, I didn't really start drinking alcoholically till like in my 30s. I didn't drink in college, whatever. And for some reason, that alcoholic gene got just clicked and, it just, I don't know if I was under stress or whatever, and it was like, I couldn't quit, at one point, and then I started drinking earlier in the day, blah, blah, blah. But I think with a lot of people, it's like you say, in the mind, they just think it's willpower. And they think, well, you should be able just to stop, and trying to tell them it's a disease, they say it's a cop-out.
Yeah, well,
And
that's,
especially if you just start when you're in your late 30s.
yeah, and the book calls those people that they're in the world of ignorance. They don't, not that they're stupid, but they just don't understand what they're dealing with because their reaction to alcohol is 1000% different than ours. So they have no idea. We skipped over that, but there was a paragraph that says, you should want to stop for her or for them or for it, or, and all of that stuff. But, they just don't understand, they just don't get it. So, there's a lot of stuff we need to go over here and, but the book does acknowledge the fact that women are, it doesn't say anything about Native Americans, but it does say about women that the alcohol takes them down and out faster than it does men. And that's a medical thing there, but, so.
It did real quick.
Yeah. Okay, so, we're gonna pick that up next week where we left off, and we'll leave it there. We got a couple of minutes. Anybody got a question? Any questions to close up with? Yes,
When you were talking about, like the acute alcoholic, chronic alcoholics.
yes.
Never mind.
What?
That I forgot. It just-
You know what we call that? A mature moment.
Yeah.
We're passing the basket, yes.
Danny, are you gonna discuss what's called the Jelinek curve, Dr.
No.
Jelinek's theory?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. I try to stay not too much into the medical stuff. So that's actually a very interesting concept there. I'm a little familiar with it. I'm not familiar enough with it to teach. It is, but it's interesting. Yeah.
I gotta keep it simple, Danny.
Yeah.
You know me.
All right, guys. Nice to see you all there. Jim, no matter what, Jim, let's me and you keep coming back, all right?
Hi, Danny. Thank you.
All right, guys. Thank Barbara. How are you, honey? Kim, Greg, Teresa. All right, guys. Thank you. See you next time.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, that's-
Thank you.
Bye.